It had been a long time since Damon asked me to come along anywhere. So when he appeared at my basement door that morning and said they were heading to Keller's Market and could use an extra set of hands, I didn't hesitate. I nodded, reached for my coat, and made sure my purse had my coupons and shopping list. Not that they ever used it, but I liked to feel prepared. Vanessa was already in the car, immaculate as always. Her hair was swept into a tight bun, not a strand out of place. She wore heels even to a grocery store, and her sunglasses were perched on top of her head like a crown. Eli was in the back seat, tapping away on his phone, barely glancing up when I climbed in beside him. I smiled anyway. "Morning, Grandma," he mumbled. I clutched my purse in my lap, careful not to let my knee bump his leg. Vanessa didn't say hello. Instead, she twisted around in her seat lips, barely parting, as she muttered, "Try not to embarrass us in there, okay?" I didn't respond. I'd learned not to. My son was in the driver's seat, focused on traffic, oblivious to the way his wife's words landed. We pulled into the parking lot of Keller's Market, the same store I'd shopped at for over 3 decades. I used to know every cashier by name. Back when Abram Keller ran it himself, before the expansion, he'd give me holiday ham discounts just for bringing in his favorite banana bread. That was a long time ago. Vanessa strode ahead, pushing the cart with purpose. Damon followed. Eli trailed after, and I shuffled behind slow, from the stiffness in my knees. We weaved through the aisles like strangers, Vanessa barking out brand names and sizes, as if running a drill. I tried to add a few things. Grapes Eli used to love the soup Damon liked as a boy, but each item was dismissed with a clipped, "Not on the list." At checkout, I found myself next to the cashier, a young man in his 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, scanning the first item. "How's your day going?" Before I could open my mouth, Vanessa stepped in front of me. "That old woman is just the maid. Don't talk to her." The words landed like a slap. My breath caught. The cashier's expression faltered, confusion taking over his face. Behind me, Damon let out a laugh, loud, sharp, ugly. Eli joined in, echoing his father's amusement. "Yeah," Eli snickered. "She just follows us around like a helper or something." My hands clutched the handle of my purse. I couldn't look at the cashier, couldn't meet the eyes of the people in line behind us. I stood there as they laughed, as Vanessa smirked, and paid as my son said nothing. I walked out of that store the way I'd walked into it, quiet, careful, unseen, but something inside me was shifting. The car ride home was silent, at least for me. Vanessa chattered about dinner reservations, Damon chimed in about the game that evening, and Eli sat with his headphones in, bobbing his head to music I couldn't hear. I sat behind them, staring out the window, watching the buildings blur into one another. No one asked me how I was feeling. No one mentioned what had happened at the checkout. As far as they were concerned, it had already been forgotten. Back at the house, I reached for the grocery bags, instinctively carrying 2, while Vanessa took one, and Damon none. Eli disappeared upstairs. Vanessa told me to make something light for dinner. I nodded, as I always did. I made soup. From scratch. Chicken and rice. Vanessa didn't thank me. Damon didn't look up from his phone. Eli spooned it down like it was fuel, not food. Afterward, I washed every dish, wiped every counter, and folded the kitchen towel like I used to in my catering days. Only now, there was no invoice, no compliment, no client. When Vanessa first moved in 10 years ago, I was still running Callaway Catering from this very kitchen. Small jobs, mostly family parties, Sunday brunches, church luncheons. I had regulars who asked for me by name. My pot roast was famous in 3 counties. That business had kept me afloat after my husband died. It gave me purpose. It gave me pride. Vanessa found it messy. She said strangers coming into the house made her uncomfortable. She told Damon it was time I retired, and enjoyed the peace of being a grandmother. One by one, I canceled clients. I let the food warmers collect dust. I folded up my apron and tucked it into the back of my closet. I told myself it was temporary. The truth was, I let her erase me. I moved into the basement to give them space. I stopped hosting Sunday dinners to respect their routine. I started asking permission to buy groceries to use the car to have visitors. I convinced myself it was fine. That family meant compromise. That love looked like sacrifice. That night, after the dishes were put away and the television murmured upstairs, I stood in front of the mirror above my tiny dresser. The light flickered. My reflection looked pale, smaller than I remembered. I touched the edge of the glass and whispered, "When did I start apologizing for existing?" Then I turned, walked slowly to the closet, and pulled back the coats I hadn't worn in years. Behind the coats I hadn't worn in years, tucked between the wall and the back of the closet, was a small metal panel barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. I knelt slowly, letting my knees settle on the thin carpet. My fingers hesitated at first, brushing dust from the edges, before I pressed in the old combination. 4 numbers. A date no one else in this house would remember. The day Thomas left me. The lock clicked open with a tired sound, and the safe door creaked as I pulled it wide. Everything was still in order. A neat stack of folders, plastic sleeves with deeds and account statements, a small cloth pouch with keys. I reached for the top folder, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time: ownership. After Thomas walked out, I swore I would never rely on anyone again. I sold the little house we'd bought together, used the money to buy a rundown duplex, lived in one half, and rented the other. That was the beginning. Over the years, I invested carefully, slow, quiet, deliberate moves. No one ever asked, and I never told. I flipped through each folder, now tracing the numbers that had accumulated over decades. 3 rental properties downtown, 2 more on the edge of campus, a stake in a commercial building that housed a dentist's office, a laundromat, and a bakery. I read through the balance sheets, my name neatly printed beside words like owner and partner. The final folder was thinner, older. A signed agreement dated 16 years ago with Abram Keller's name beside mine. I remembered the day he asked me for help expanding the market. He didn't want to go to a bank, said he trusted neighbors more than bankers. I believed in him. I gave him the money and asked for no recognition, only a percentage and quiet respect. 40%. That's what I owned. Keller's Market, the very store where my daughter-in-law silenced me, where my own son laughed in my face, where a cashier apologized with his eyes because he thought I was someone not worth speaking to. I sank onto the floor, the folder resting in my lap. My head leaned back against the coats, and I closed my eyes. They thought I was powerless. They thought I needed them. All these years I let them think it. The truth had always been different. And now it was time to stop hiding it. I gathered the folders, set them neatly on my bed, and returned to the closet for the rest. There was more in there than just numbers. There was history leverage and every piece of proof I needed. I hadn't planned what would come next, but I knew one thing with certainty. I would never again let them speak to me like I was beneath them, and the next words I'd overhear would make sure of that. The next afternoon, I came upstairs earlier than usual. I'd gone for a walk while they were out, something I rarely did anymore. The air was sharp but clean, and I let it fill my lungs until I didn't feel quite so heavy. When I came through the front door, I heard voices drifting from the living room. I paused in the hallway out of habit more than anything. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard my name, and that changed everything. Vanessa's voice was light and mocking, like she was sharing a private joke. I swear, if she keeps shuffling around like that, I'm going to lose my mind. Can't Damon just put her in a home already? Somewhere quiet? With staff. Out of sight. A second voice laughed, sharp, nasal, someone I didn't recognize. She's still downstairs in that little room. Of course, Vanessa replied. I mean, it's practically a storage closet with a bed, but she thinks she's part of the family. Makes herself a little coffee in the morning like she pays rent. They both laughed again. I stood frozen, hand resting lightly against the wall. We're just waiting for things to, resolve. Vanessa continued, her tone thick with insinuation. Damon thinks she might have a tiny bit saved. Maybe a life insurance policy from her dead husband. Probably just enough to cover a halfway decent facility. A pause. Then Damon's voice joined them. She's still healthy as a horse. Probably outlive all of us. But hey, we've got the room picked out for when the time comes. Another burst of laughter. I turned and walked softly back down the stairs. I didn't cry. I didn't slam doors. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the folders I'd laid out the night before. The numbers, the deeds, the names. Their laughter still echoed in my ears, but it didn't feel sharp this time. It felt clarifying. They truly believed I had nothing. No money, no legacy, no voice. That evening after dinner, while they watched TV and argued about which takeout to order, I closed my bedroom door and retrieved my address book. It was a small black one, cracked at the spine. Carla Mendez was the third name down under M. She was a friend of a friend. Quiet. Sharp. The kind of lawyer who didn't ask unnecessary questions and didn't leak information. I dialed her number slowly, the rotary clicks sounding louder in the quiet room. She picked up on the second ring. Carla Mendez. Carla, this is Irene Calloway. I need help updating some legal documents. It's time. She didn't ask why. She only said, tomorrow at 10. Yes, I said. That will be perfect. I hung up and placed the phone back on its cradle, my hand steady. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking. Carla's office was on the second floor of an old brick building downtown, the kind of place you could walk by a dozen times and never notice. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm smile, then led me into a private room with soft lighting and a sturdy oak table. It was the kind of room built for decisions. I laid out the folders. She opened each one, flipping through the pages with quick, practiced eyes. She didn't interrupt, didn't comment, just absorbed. When she finally looked up, her expression was unreadable. You've kept meticulous records, she said. I've had time, I replied. We began with the will. I told her I wanted Damon and Vanessa removed entirely. No property, no money, nothing. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Then I asked her to draft a trust for Eli, but with clear conditions he could access the funds, only if by the time he turned 25 he'd maintained a relationship with me built on basic decency. No calls, no kindness, no trust. Legally, Carla said you'll need documentation proof of ongoing contact, a paper trail, but it's doable. Then let's do it, I said. Next came the ownership agreements. I wanted formal control over my shares of Keller's Market, not just a silent partnership, but full operational authority. Carla pulled in another associate for that. A younger man with sharp glasses and a quieter demeanor. Together, we rewrote the terms of my investment. By the time the meeting ended, I had the authority to step into the store and make decisions, not just collect profit. Carla leaned back in her chair as we reviewed the last document. Once we file this, she said carefully, there's no going back. They'll be cut off completely. If you change your mind later, it may not be easy to undo. I folded my hands on the table and looked her squarely in the eyes. I'm not going back, I said. I'm going forward. Her mouth twitched into the smallest smile. When we were done, I walked out with a folder of signed paperwork, a list of scheduled filings, and the number for a locksmith to change the store's security codes if needed. Outside, the air felt different. Brighter. Sharper. I took the long way home, letting the wind tug at the edges of my coat. Back in my room, I tucked the legal folder beside the old safe and smoothed the bedspread with one hand. Upstairs, I could hear Vanessa talking to someone on the phone, her voice loud and flat. Damon's footsteps crossed the kitchen. Eli thumped down the hallway. Their world continued unchanged, but mine had shifted. And in just a few more days, so would theirs. 2 weeks passed without a word from me that wasn't necessary. I still cooked their meals, folded their laundry, and nodded politely when spoken to. I was as invisible as ever, and they seemed to prefer it that way. But beneath the surface, everything had already changed. At exactly 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I asked them to meet me in the living room. Damon groaned from the couch, but stayed put. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, already irritated. Eli wandered in from the kitchen, a granola bar in hand. They didn't notice the 2 people walking in behind me until they were standing in the doorway. "Who are they?" Vanessa asked, already defensive. "This is Carla Mendez," I said calmly, "my attorney. And this is Abram Keller." Damon's brow furrowed. "From Keller's Market." Abram gave a polite nod, but it was Carla who spoke next. "Thank you for joining us. Mrs. Calloway has asked us here today to clarify a few matters." Vanessa narrowed her eyes at me. "Matters like what?" I didn't look at her. I looked at my son. "Damon, you've made a lot of assumptions about my life. About what I do, what I have, and what I'm worth. Today, I'm correcting them." I opened the folder Carla had handed me earlier and laid it on the coffee table. "I own 40% of Keller's Market," I said. "Abram and I have been partners for 16 years. Vanessa let out a disbelieving laugh, but it died in her throat when Abram spoke. "It's true. Irene provided the capital for our expansion. Without her, there wouldn't be a second location, let alone 5. Damon looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. "Wait. What I also own? 5 rental properties across Columbus," I continued. "A commercial building downtown and a management company that handles them all." Vanessa was staring now, mouth slightly open. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Damon asked, his voice thin. "Because you never asked. And when I did mention anything remotely personal, you dismissed it. Or worse, tried to take it." Eli looked from his father to me. "So, you're rich." I met his eyes, and for once he didn't look away. "That's not the point, Eli." I turned back to Carla, who opened a second folder. "This house," I said, "was refinanced 6 months ago under Damon's name. As of this week, I've purchased the mortgage." Vanessa stood. "You did what you have 30 days to vacate," Carla said firmly. "Legal notice was filed this morning." Vanessa's face drained of color. Damon looked like he couldn't breathe. Eli sat frozen, eyes wide, saying nothing. "You lied to us," Vanessa whispered. "You were waiting for the right moment to humiliate us." "No," I said. "I was waiting for the right moment to stop being humiliated." I picked up the folder, smoothed its edges, and stood. "You'll receive all final notices in writing. I won't be staying here tonight." And with that, I walked toward the stairs, leaving behind the silence I had once lived in. I took my time packing. Not because I was second-guessing anything, but because I wanted to be deliberate. I folded each blouse with care, chose the shoes I'd wear for the flight, and zipped up the small suitcase I'd used on my last catering job before Vanessa moved in. I left behind the old robes, the chipped coffee mug, and the framed photo on the nightstand that had long since lost its meaning. When I stepped into the hallway, Damon was waiting at the top of the stairs. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "You can't do this, Mom," he said. Not angry, not pleading, just stunned. I looked him in the eye. I already did. Vanessa didn't come out. She knew. She'd always known I was easier to manage when I was tired, small, quiet. She didn't know how to respond to someone who had nothing left to lose. I rolled my suitcase through the living room. Eli sat curled into the corner of the couch, silent, watching me. I paused beside him for a moment. "You'll understand this one day," I said gently. "Maybe sooner than you think." He nodded barely, and I walked out the front door without another word. At the hotel, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse onto the bed or sit in silence staring at the ceiling. I ordered room service pasta with cream sauce and a slice of chocolate cake. I watched the evening news. I drew a hot bath and soaked until my limbs stopped aching. Then I opened my laptop, logged into my travel account, and booked a one-way flight to Italy. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't leave a note. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I took one last look around the hotel room, packed the few things I'd unpacked, and stepped into the hallway as the city was just beginning to stir. No one saw me leave, and that was fine, because I wasn't leaving in shame. I wasn't running. I was choosing myself. I walked out into the quiet morning air, pulled my coat tighter around me, and hailed a cab to the airport. By the time the plane took off rising above the gray Ohio clouds, I had no regrets. I had my name, my choices, my voice, and for the first time in a very long time, I had my life back. Epilogue. Lake Como. I sip my espresso slowly, watching the morning light ripple across the surface of Lake Como. The air is warm, soft with promise. From my terrace, the hills roll gently toward the water, dotted with olive trees and wildflowers I've come to recognize by name. This life doesn't ask anything of me but to live it. No lists, no demands. Just the quiet rhythm of choice. Most mornings I visit the market in the village. The baker saves me the crusty loaves I like, and the florist insists I take extra lavender for my windowsill. I speak Italian now, or at least enough to be understood. I read. I write letters. I walk without being watched. Eli calls every Sunday. At first, the conversations were stiff. He asked how I was doing, told me school was fine, mumbled apologies that didn't quite land. But as the weeks passed, his voice steadied. He stopped calling me grandma like it was a duty. He started asking real questions. What books I was reading. What the lake smelled like in the morning. What my life was like now that it was mine. "I'm sorry I laughed," he said once, his voice cracking. I knew it wasn't funny. I told him it mattered that he knew that now. A month after arriving, I signed the final documents to launch the Callaway Foundation, dedicated to supporting elderly women trapped in toxic family situations. The mission was simple: no one should have to earn dignity, especially not from the people who share their blood. Some nights, as the lake glows gold and the day folds into dusk, I sit with a glass of wine and let the quiet settle around me. I don't think about Ohio. I don't think about who I used to be. I whisper to myself, not in anger, but in peace. This isn't revenge. This is rebirth. Have you ever stayed silent just to be accepted? What would happen if you finally chose yourself?